Okay, I've got a 15-minute video for you today. I'm going to be talking about the changes coming to Nova Warp. If you don't play Warlock, that's okay, I've got you covered. I know a lot of people that play Warlock, and I happen to play Warlock as well. And I've got a couple of different opinions about this subclass in general. I've got the build that I'm using equipped. This is the build that I use in PvP on a regular basis on my Warlock. It's really strong. I think it's really good the way that it is, and it's really strong for a variety of reasons, not just one. So this subclass has Blink available to it, which is the only subclass-specific jump in the game. It also happens to be the only class-specific jump in the game that allows you to teleport. And it's a fantastic mobility option. There's a ton of exotics that work with this subclass, whether they be neutral, whether they be specific, whether they be mobility-based or ability-based. This subclass benefits from pretty much everything in the sandbox that you can think of. It's one of those subclasses that has been overly dominant, and it's also one of those subclasses that has been nerfed into the ground to the point where it was completely unusable. There was a couple of months, or during a season, where this subclass was just, why are you even doing that? Like, even with as good as Controverse was, it was really hard to justify using this subclass, because the super was terrible. It was god-awful. Like, you had to specifically just say, no, I'm not going to use my super. So what I'm doing in the background is I'm trying to catch up with the video, and while I'm recording this afterwards, I'm trying to show you the melee lunge distance in the current sandbox with this ability, right? So this subclass has a ranged melee ability, not unlike other subclasses. It just increases the melee lunge distance, and that's the difference between the charged melee and the non-charged melee right there on the floor. I don't have a very good way of detailing the distance, but that's what it looks like. And Warlocks are getting an increase to their melee lunge distance by about a meter or so. Now, Ophidian Aspects is an exotic that works with your melee lunge distance, and it's one of those exotics that actually benefits the charged melees more than it does the base melees. And I did some testing around. You're not going to see too much of that testing in the background footage. This is really more to show the conclusory results. So I have done more testing than is going to be shown in this video. You're not going to see all of it, but I'm giving you like the TLDR, the patch notes basically, of my testing. And I'm trying to show what that melee lunge distance is going to look like between something like Controverse Holds, or just a base exotic that doesn't grant melee range versus an exotic that does, and what it looks like when you're using like your ability and whatnot. And we're also going to talk about some other stuff too, but that's what I'm doing right now in the background. Okay, so we're going to be hitting this captain here. This is a little bit of a clearer area to use as a benchmark, because you can see the floor a little bit better. There's better lighting. So I'm trying to make sure that you can see how far back the melee lunge distance is at base. This is before we have the charged melee active. And we're still hitting at about this little corner here. Yeah, so we're just going to say right where those floor tiles intersect, that's the base melee range. Once you take it off of the angle, it's actually right about there. So that's like the base melee range for this exotic here. Yeah. And right past that is the base melee range for the exotic with the melee ability. Okay, so that's the range that you're looking at between there. And that's the range that you're going to be hitting at with the new buff to Warlock. Right here. That's the new range for this melee with this exotic. It's right here. I mean, it's way out there. That is an enormous range. That's beyond, I think that's more than Synthesept Titan range. If I'm going to be honest with you, I'm pretty sure that within that bracket right there, that's where the new melee range is. That's pretty absurd. It's way out there. So, yeah, that's what that looks like. It's pretty crazy. Now, if you take off like a melee-based exotic, I don't know why handheld does that sometimes. for some reason it just auto tracks. That would have killed me in the new sandbox because of the new thing. I think that was a good change too. I think dealing damage to yourself with handheld is really good. It adds a little risk reward to the ability. So we're gonna try and be in this bracket. This is about where we were with previous ones. This is the base melee without a melee range bolstering exotic, and you'll see it's like right there. So that's the difference. That's going to be the new range versus the current range, without a melee boosting exotic, with the melee ability charged on this subclass. That's pretty huge too. So the reason why that's huge is because this subclass happens to have blink, and you can do like blink shotgun shenanigans. And when you have a really long distance lunge attached to your melee, that means that you can blink shotgun kind of at the pinnacle of your blink, and then close down on the kill with your melee because your lunge distance is so high. It's pretty nuts. It's pretty nuts. So that's going to be a good strat. I think that's going... I don't know if that was a necessary change. I know that it's going to be a very beneficial change to Warlocks. I think it's going to be a little obnoxious, and I think people are going to complain a little bit about it, because this subclass in particular has a highly aggressive playstyle attached to it, and we're going to talk about some of the other things that make this subclass extremely strong, and kind of like a non-choice in the future. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. I actually kind of really don't like it. I think that they made this subclass too good. I know that they've made changes to handheld Supernova, and I'm sure they're changing Controverse holds, but there's plenty of other things with this subclass that make it extremely competitive already. So this is my Controverse holds that I use. I have 2 of them. They're not fully leveled. I rarely use this in PvP because I don't think it's very fair. This has a paragraph attached to it, a huge paragraph, and it does everything that you could ever want an exotic to do for a melee or for a grenade-based ability. So keep an eye on the bottom left-hand side of my screen. That's going to be where my grenade energy is. You're going to see that there's an ability thing that prompts up that says Dark Matter. That's the subclass doing some of the energy regeneration and health regeneration. And you can see Dark Matter activating again. That's a void-based ability. Void-based abilities regenerate your health and add energy to your class ability, your grenade ability, and your melee ability on this subclass. So it's really strong. What we're going to look at is the difference between the range of a really good rolled shotgun and handheld Supernova currently. So the range is getting kind of reined in, but this is why the subclass has such a bad taste attached to it in the community eyes. Is Controverse holds and handheld Supernovas. You can spam this range, which is the majority of most shotgun ranges, like the outer limits of shotgun ranges, with handheld Supernova, and you will guarantee a kill from that range. It's absurd. And you also have like a 70% damage reduction. So while you're at the extreme ranges of the shotgun, you're reducing their damage, and then you're also reducing the damage with the range penalty attached to shotguns. So they have damage fall off and a 70% damage fall off, or 70% damage reduction as well. And that's ridiculous. So Controverse was actually, I think, the biggest offender. Handheld Supernova is pretty bad, but Controverse just took it to another level. Now here's the next broken thing that I want to talk about that is being changed. In the background, I'm in my super. I'm spamming the spacebar, which is my jump, so I can blink as often as possible in the super. Now please note that you'll see that while I'm blinking, it's not draining my super bar. So there's 2 mobility modes that you can have with the subclass if you use blink while you're in your super. The first one is blink itself, your jump, which acts as a teleport. The second is the lateral directional control teleport that you have access to as an alternate movement mode in this subclass. That one is getting a buff because it's extending its duration. Now this is why I use Astrocyte Burst in PvP. It's a big difference. It's a big difference between one and the other. Now the thing that Astrocyte Burst does is it increases your blink ability and your mobility in your blink, directional control in your blink, and the height of your blink, and as many blink charges as you can have at base. So it goes up from 2 to 3 with Astrocyte Burst with base movement. It also increases the handling of your weapons as well. And it increases the rate at which your radar returns after you blink. So it does a lot of really good things too. It's a movement ability based exotic that's specific to Blink only, but it is as good as a movement ability based exotic for a specific thing could ever be. Now we're going to do a quick lap of the menagerie here, and keep in mind that when I blink forward like that, or like that, or that, or that, it takes away from my super bar, but that is getting changed. So that mobility mode is going to have a reduced impact on the amount of super energy that's consumed in the future, which I think is completely unnecessary, because that is a ton of movement. A ton of movement, and it's perfectly balanced the way it is, especially when you consider that Blink is also a good mobility mode within this subclass. So blinking with Astrocyte Burst and teleporting around, you have a lot more control, and I'm really spamming it. Really spamming all the teleports and all that kind of stuff. That's a lot of mobility. And recently Dawnblade got nerfed to have its mobility changed around, and the problem with this subclass getting this kind of buff while currently having this kind of mobility available to it already is it's going to get nerfed in the future. It's like, I don't know why you would have to buff this. Like, there's so much mobility available to you as a player. Like, I'm in the air, that's really hard to hit, just for anybody. So the fact that it has a low damage resistance attached to it, the fact that you can get health on kills with your super is already, it's already fine. The super doesn't need to be changed. But it's getting some buffs to it. It's getting increased damage resistance, it's getting an increase to its duration, through a change to the way that the teleport system works, and I don't agree with it at all. I don't think that that's the way to do it. I think it was completely fine. They just needed to adjust handheld Supernova, and that's coming from somebody who uses this subclass on a regular basis. Like, I don't use the busted exotic Controverse holds, which is a little broken because you can just spam handheld Supernova and then mitigate damage and all that. And they definitely needed to change that, and I know that they're going to. But I use a variety of different exotics, and the one that I use the most is Astrocyte Burst. And I know that, for a fact, even if you don't have the most busted exotic Controverse hold equipped, you can still do some really raunchy things in PvP with this subclass, because it's already this good. So I just don't agree with the changes that they made to the super. I think they're overdoing it. I think that there's going to be some outcry from the community because it makes this subclass too much of a non-choice, and we've had outcries before regarding non-choice subclasses, like Bottom Tree Striker. And the other thing too is that this is coming with nerfs to other viable subclasses that could be competing for the same type of interest from the player base, like the Arcweb subclass, which has a very similar playstyle. The Arcweb subclass with like Conduction Tines from Crown of Tempest. That's another build that I use quite a bit, and that has Blink involved with the super as well. And if they're changing that, they're really limiting the amount of options that people are going to have, especially in trials and especially in competitive formats. It's going to be more hyper-focused because they've made this new Nova Warp way too strong. Way too strong. It's not... You just don't need to do that. You could have just nerfed handheld Supernova and left it at that. It would have been completely competitive and completely fine. But now I think there's going to be some outcry attached to this new subclass, and it's going to be a little too good. Just a little too good. And Warlocks also already have Dawnblade and Top Tree Dawnblade, which has great mobility as well. It has great subclass synergy. And I don't think they need to have another like S-tier subclass in the game. Like, I just don't think it's necessary. I think it's just way too much, way too often, and I think it's going to have to get nerfed again. And that's what frustrates me, is that, you know, like, it's just doing the same thing over and over and over again. It just could have been right where it's at with the changes to handheld, and everybody would have been fine. And I also think that this coming with, like I was saying, with changes to other subclasses is what's going to make this such a non-choice, and I don't think the other subclasses really warrant being changed. Like, Bottom Tree Arcstrider is good. It's really good with Wormhusk, and it's really good in a competitive environment. But does that mean that it's as good, if not better, than Nova Warp? Like, its super is not better than Nova Warp's, I can tell you that. You have damage reduction while you're dodging, sure, that's good. But you don't have cross-map potential mobility to cross one section of the map and then actually go back to the side that you started on. You don't have that kind of potential on Hunter. You could use Golden Gun and Weighted Knife and, you know, cross-map Golden Gun people in the head, that's cool. But you don't have this kind of potential either. So Hunters are kind of falling by the wayside in this. They have a good neutral game, but this subclass is getting a little bit too out of hand, in my opinion. So that's my video.